Hello, my loves. Hello, hello, hello. My name is Destina. This is Spiritually Bougie Astrology, and we are going to be looking at the transits for the month of April 2023. And I'm good about this month. I like this month because there's not going to be as much action as March, but we're taking a lot of the action from March and finally able to take it forward in a lot of ways. Now, kind of recapping where we're at in the year, January was really about kind of shaking some things loose, the types of things that came to the surface, the attitudes, the things that were said, the mistakes that were made. It shook a lot of us in some way, shape, or form. And it kind of made us like look at things a little differently. As certain things were revealed, now as certain things started to be understood, then it kind of took us into a new energy. And that energy was like, clearing and kind of making the final bits of space through the last parts of January going into February. And February was kind of putting new players into play, putting the new pieces on the board, this type of energy, just kind of shifting some things. But where we were shifting to, where we were shifting into, what we were trying to get in line, we weren't completely clear about yet. And we went into March a little foggy, knowing that changes were necessary, knowing that new direction was necessary, knowing that we're going to take steps forward, but not fully understanding where they're going. Certain things had to get revealed. Certain roadblocks had to come down. Certain areas where we were foggy and unable to understand, we got a lot of clarity. And that happened in March. And then we get to the very last week of March, which is carrying us into April. And if you listen to the week ahead forecast video for that last week of March, I said in there that that week is a milestone week. This week that we're going into, this very first few days of April, we're still in the milestone energy. We're still in an energy of trying to get everything to this level and passing the baton on the track. If you listen to that, I had a couple different examples of this, but it feels like we're kind of going through like a race or an obstacle course of some level. And we're either, trying to go up the ropes and back down to then go army crawl in the mud, or you're on the actual track and you're looking to pass the baton, or you're waiting for the baton. You're waiting for something to come through for you to start working on it. And for some of us, actually a lot of us, we're passing the baton to ourselves, and we're just allowing ourselves to finally take the next steps, to go to the next level, to go in the new direction, to take the next part of the initiative forward. April is allowing for forward motion. There's actually very little obstacles to where we're going in April. So we're all kind of in this fast moving energy. It's not so much of a cannonball. It's more us taking new steps forward, us taking new action, us finding this new area of alignment and figuring out if this is whatever is aligning, is it for us or is it for someone else? Are we good with this? Are we joining in? Are we going to be a part of this? Or are we taking a step back and going in a different direction? We're going to get those final little tests in April. And as we get into eclipse season, we're going to start to feel and understand new areas of stability. And that's what's really going to start to come through. And those new areas of stability, come from the initiative and the actions that have been taken all through the last part of March and all through the first part of April. So I want to be clear about something before this actually starts. This is just the major transits of April. It's not going to be the play-by-play, day-by-day thing like I do on the weekly episodes. And there will be at least 2 of these transits that I will do additional videos on just for those. And I will break those down based off of the rising sign. But for now, let's stick to where we're at. We're looking at April. April. Pull the screen. You can see the window. Voila. We're going to start on April 3rd. On April 3rd, Mercury goes into Taurus. And as soon as Mercury changes signs and goes into Taurus, it's immediately going to enter a square from Pluto. Pluto is in the midst of transforming this one area of our life, but it's not a big transformation. It might feel like it at the time, depending on what you're doing. I'm converting my garage. For that, that's a big transformation. But I got other friends like, I'm painting my room. I'm changing all my color palettes. I'm starting a garden. Like there's some small transformations and big transformations. This is a pinky toe dip energy as to where we're at in the changes. And Mercury entering this square from Pluto is like running into somebody in the midst of change, walking around the corner in the store, and there's somebody you weren't expecting to see. A lot of this will feel very, very sudden. It's not a part of the plan. It's abrupt. Some people will be triggered. Pluto can provoke a lot of fear in regards to people that hold too much power, either power over us, power over a situation, things along these lines. But Pluto is direct. So he's imposing something. He's allowing something to occur, and Mercury is just kind of floating into the mix. So a lot of us are going to be exactly that. We're going to open a letter. Mercury revolves around communication. It revolves around logistics. It revolves around being busy and doing things with information in line. This is Mercury going into an earth sign, tangible communication. What else is in this earth sign? Venus and Uranus. Some of this communication can come from a loved one. Some of this communication can come over the internet. So getting an email, getting that DM, getting something along those lines that we weren't expecting, it will feel very, very sudden. Now, considering this is the first square to Pluto, that's not the moon, but the first real personal planet square to Pluto since Pluto changed signs, there is something a little bit more tangible to the energy, a little bit more real. This level of communication, it's a necessary communication, whoever we're talking to. And I love the fact that this is actually occurring as the moon is in Virgo. It's in the sign that Mercury rules. So part of this communication, again, it can be a very, very tangible, electronic, spoken, sung, sung, it can be sung, but it feels like it's got timing to it. The moon is entering a trine from Uranus. So this tells me that there is something very much about sudden timing, sudden change, sudden shift, sudden understanding in some way. It doesn't have to be heavy. It could also just be as simple as you ran into your friend at the hardware store because you're painting something. You're painting your purple room, your pink room, your green room, whatever you're doing. You're painting something or something. Like you run into your friend at the hardware store, like, yeah, you should totally come over and see what I'm working on. And that can literally fall into this. But it could also be as far as you go around the corner and you see somebody from your past that you didn't want to see. So it can be a mix of either or. It can be like that sudden, exciting surprise, but it can also be the other of running into somebody unexpectedly that at one point triggered fears or held power over you. Okay. Moving this along just a couple of days, and we're going to get to the full moon in Libra. Now, this is our last full moon before we go into eclipse season. This is a full moon where eclipses will start to take place later this year. So going into the idea, if you've listened to previous episodes, I've said parts of the last bit of March was like the prequel. Everything following the first Aries new moon was like a prequel. This feels like it goes into that prequel category, but it's not a prequel of this eclipse season. It's a prequel of next eclipse season, the one that will happen later this year, that will be in Venus ruled areas. The eclipse axis and what's going on with the eclipses, it's very, very interesting. And I will definitely be doing a video of that one based off your rising sign later on of how the eclipses are going to be playing out. But this full moon is occurring in Venus's sign. It's in a sign represented by the scales. So it's not just the Venusian things in regards to our food and art and singing and things like that, but there is something more balancing, more realistic, more logical in this aspect. Certain conversations need to be had. We feel drawn to talk about something. Why do I say that? Because Mercury is going to be making a conjunction to the North Node. The North Node is an area where we're hungering for something, where we're driven towards something, where we're motivated to be a certain way or go a certain direction. Our drive is here. We desire it. We are trying to consume it. That can be negative and positive. It depends on the situation, depends on your individual karma. But given what Mercury represents, what was triggered a few days prior could be coming forward and making us want to have a conversation, making us need to have a certain conversation. It's time to have a certain conversation. And this conversation is breaking through an area of fog. There needs to be understanding as to why something was so unclear for so long. Why am I saying that? Venus is in her home sign. She's in Taurus. But while this full moon is going on in another sign that Venus rules Taurus, Venus rules Libra. Venus is in one of her home signs. But Neptune is pushing his will onto her, but not in a negative sense. It's a sextile. Sextiles are when feminine to feminine energies speak. We are talking about Neptune in a watery feminine sign, making a gentle, constructive, positive connection to Venus in an earth feminine sign. There is understanding. There is an area where we need to get clear that will bring more things into balance, that will allow more things to be understood by equal parties. We need to have both sides of the story, both sides of the event, both sides of the conversation to balance the scales. If one person's doing all of the talking, the scales aren't balanced. If one person's taking all of the action, the scales aren't balanced. This is a balancing full moon. Now, the next two moon cycles that follow this one are going to be more martial. They're going to be related to Mars, not so much Venus, and those will be through eclipse season. So this, again, it feels like a prequel to where we're going to be when the South Node goes into Libra later this year. We need understanding. We need to know some things. Certain things need to be addressed and need to be communicated. Now, what you also need to know about this full moon is that technically, late on the 6th, early on the 7th, it kind of depends on your time zone. Remember, I'm Central Time. So going off of that, right after the full moon perfects, Mercury is also going to enter shadow. What that means is that later this month, when Mercury turns retrograde, he'll be frozen in one area of the sky, just kind of spinning in place for a little bit. And then certain things will happen that makes us kind of go backwards and come back to a certain point. This is the point. This is the point of shadow. This is the area that we go back to. So the things that are being discussed this week with the full moon, in the effort to rebalance certain Venusian things in this energy, we go into coming back to it later on. We start something here. We have a certain conversation here. We allow things to progress. We're going to kind of hit a brick wall. Mercury is going to start going backwards. And then we're going to come back to this energy, this topic, this situation. But we come back to it with new perspective, new ideas, new way of doing things, new way of handling things. But understand, we will be coming back to certain conversations, certain situations that are going to be had after this transit. Now, the reason I went ahead and brought up Mercury going into shadow is because there is an element to Mercury's shadow with this retrograde that I'm going to refer to in the weekly videos whenever it comes out. I'll probably also going to go over this a little bit more in the Mercury retrograde, but there's something here in regards to the sextile from Saturn, as Mercury is implying its sextile to Mars. It tells me it's time for certain conversations, very pivotal, necessary conversations that we desire, conversations that are feeding into this area of life that is changing our initiative and changing our drive. Other people need to understand and take new considerations and new steps in care for this area of life. And understand that we're going into a rebalancing. I am really starting to see something right now, and it's really weird. I'm so sorry. I'm trying to turn the psychic energy off, but I'm starting to see something. I'm going to move on. I'll talk more about this in that Mercury retrograde video that I do, and that will also be based off ascendant sign, rising sign, ascendant, that type of thing. All right. Moving along to the 11th. Now, depending on where you're at in the time zones. Some people, this starts on the 10th, but it really goes exact on the 11th. And I've got this at the later time for a reason, and it has to do with the moon. So very, very late on the 10th, it starts. Going into the 11th is when it occurs, but we have the conjunction of the sun and Jupiter. Now, any time of year where the sun makes a conjunction to Jupiter, it is considered to be the luckiest day of the year. That's exactly what this is. This is a sun-Jupiter conjunction in this Martian sign, right before we go into eclipse season. So, in a lot of ways, this luck that comes through needs to be realized, and it needs to be fed from another area. And I feel like that's what the moon is doing right here, is kind of feeding into this. The moon is in Sagittarius, which is ruled by Jupiter, and it's making a trine, so one side of a triangle, to Jupiter and to the sun. By doing this area that we are passionate about, by taking certain steps in initiative, we are now starting to create our own luck. We are creating our own prosperity. We are creating our own abundance. We are creating certain energies in the actions that we've been taking, that we have taken. Sorry. There's certain actions that have been taken that now are charging us ahead, and we are feeling that area come together. We are feeling that luck. We are creating our own luck in many ways. Now, there is a bit of a layering effect to this. That's not a proper astrological term. That's a dusty term. So, what's the layering effect? Hear me out. The Sun-Jupiter conjunction is happening in Mars' sign. It's in the sign of Aries. Where is the ruler? Where is Mars? It's in Cancer. Right here. Who rules Cancer? The moon. Where's the moon? In Jupiter's sign. So even though it's not like a grand trine energy, there is like a trine layering effect. They're not in a trine. They're not in a square. Really, whenever it comes to where Mars is at in the sky, it's not even being a part of this transit. But I feel like the other two areas are feeding Mars's energy going through Cancer. So again, the actions, the progress, the process, the transformation, the new beginning, the new initiative, the new training, the new education, the new career, the new is taking certain steps forward. And it is making us realize all of the actions that we're taking and how it is benefiting us. Something must come to light, but we have so much positive energy feeding from the moon going from Jupiter's sign to Jupiter that a lot of our passions, fire signs, are starting to fall into place, and they're starting to click, and they're starting to be really recognizable with the sun's conjunction to Jupiter. It's kind of an ego boost. In a lot of ways, it's going to be an ego boost. A lot of ways, we're going to find certain things that come to the surface that we weren't expecting. I'm going to be real about that. But there's definitely something that is meant to come to light, that is meant to be recognizable in the energy going into the 11th. So I'm saying the 11th because at this time, at 10:47 Central Time, the conjunction hasn't happened yet. But this trine from the moon tells me that it's going to feed into this. So be aware also of your dreams, the 10th into the 11th. All right. That's that one. Oh, yeah, I'm still on day. Moving along. Let's get to the other thing that happens on the 10th, I forgot, on the 11th, is that Venus is going to go into Gemini. That happens on that day. Now, the thing about Venus going into Gemini is Venus is also starting mutual reception. Mercury is in Venus' sign. Venus is in Mercury's sign. We're in a house swap. I'm at your lake house. You're at my condo in the city. Congratulations. House swap. What that means is that the actions of Mercury, now in shadow, the actions of Mercury feed into Venus. The actions of Venus feed into Mercury. They are working within one another. So it really kind of comes down to what these two areas rule in your chart as to the areas that are going to really come through and play forward in the Mercury retrograde. And we'll talk about that in that other video that I'll do later on. Okay. Moving this forward, we get to the 14th, and Venus is going to enter a square from Saturn. Saturn is in Jupiter's sign. We just had our luckiest day of the year, these areas of reflection that have come to the surface. And a lot of times, Saturn implements restriction, timed restriction, rules governing, that type of energy. But Saturn is in Jupiter's sign, and Jupiter is in such a motivated, action-taking sign. If we're running into limitations, it's minor limitations. It's limitations in regards to, like, we need to scale down part of our budget. We need to scale down the grand idea or the grand scale because it can only go so far. Or it's telling you that, yes, you can do it, but not at this moment, not at this time. You need to rethink some things. You need to hesitate. You need to really look at what you're building, really look at the plan, and really look at how fast we've come so far. And I mean it just that way, because we have come really far. We've done a lot of changes in the last few months, and it's all happened very, very quickly. And whenever Saturn is in this square to Venus, it starts to feel like a temporary limitation or a temporary roadblock that makes us rethink. Why am I saying rethinking? Because Venus and Mercury are in mutual reception, and Mercury is slowing down. Mercury is slowing down. What you guys need to know is that from the 14th, when this Saturn-Venus square happens, until the I'm going to say all the way to the 25th, but Mercury will turn retrograde on the 21st. Let's be clear with that. But over the next 10 days, so all the way to the 25th, you will feel your mind slowing down. We will see other people's decisions start to slow down, start to be questioned, start to be rethought. We're going to start to feel that at this time when we get that first hit of hesitancy from the square of Saturn. Now, the thing about that is whenever we get to earlier on the 16th, late on the 15th, earlier on the 16th, I know I moved the whole wheel, I'm sorry. The moon will also make a conjunction while squaring this, while Venus is exiting its square. The moon feels like it's bringing positive interference, bringing in another opinion, getting a different idea, allowing for something else to come through to kind of break up the initial frustration. This is why I was saying it can be very, very temporary, because the moon will be a part of that energy of just like, let's rethink part of this. Let's redo part of this. Let's change something up. All right. Moving this along, we're getting really close to our eclipse, which is going to be later on the 19th. So I'm bumping this down by hour. Sorry, guys. All right. New moon number 2 in Aries, an out of sign eclipse. An eclipse in Mars's sign. Now, later in the year, so this summer, it's in July, the nodes are going to change signs. The north node is going to go into Aries. The south node will go into Libra, and we will start a new 18-month cycle. Right now, on April 19th, we're in the final phase, so to speak, of this 18-month cycle that started in January of 2022. Sorry. I keep wanting to say 2021 for some reason. I don't know. I'm sorry. It's a weird energy for me today. But we're starting to see where all of the recent changes have been, where we're at now, and where did we rush things? Where do we need to take different considerations? Where do we need to look at certain things? We're taking something to the next level, but we're realizing that there's some area that we're going to be going back over. Now, I'm going to use a building analogy. You know me, Mars in Cancer, all I can think about is building. So if you are, I'm going to think of something really small. So if you are building the garden bed, so to speak, if that's part of that transformation that you've been dealing with since Pluto went into Aquarius, I'm going to do something really small. You wanted to build a garden. Therefore, you had to put the infrastructure there. You build all your garden beds. You get it to a certain point. Well, then going back over would now be filling those beds, taking the seedlings and putting them into the beds and allowing that next layer to be just literally that, a layer. We have infrastructure. Now we need the filling. We have the pie crust. Now we need the filling. And we go backwards over that same area, but with new information, with a new trajectory, with the next layer, so to speak. This feels like it feeds into what's going to be a part of the next layer that comes through over the next few days that makes us start to go backwards. We have already felt the slowdown mentally. Even though all of our actions have been taking us forward, we have felt the slowdown. We have felt the need to rethink. We have felt the need of change in our direction already. And now we're seeing where we have rushed something, where we didn't put the screws in the right place, where we didn't frame something correctly. We made the beds too big. We can't reach into the center like we thought we could. Something like this, and we will start to go back over. Whether it's just adding another layer or having to redo something, we are going to start that following this new moon. Why am I saying it specifically that way? Bumping this by hour, fair warning. Because the sun is going to go into Taurus. It's going to immediately enter that square to Pluto. And also, as we get through the next 24 hours, Mercury is going to turn retrograde. That's going to happen on the 21st. I feel like it is whenever we actually have the sun go into Taurus and enter that square from Pluto, that we kind of see that level of transformation and understand that layering effect. We recognize the change that we need to go back over. We recognize like where the mistakes were, or we're just to the point that I'm saying the garden beds again. All the garden beds are built. And again, we see now that, okay, I can't do anything else but go back and fill everything in and do the next round of the effect. That is going to feed into a lot of this. That new moon is squaring Pluto. That new moon tells us that a lot of it is about the initiatives that are moving forward and where we are going in our actions. But then the sun goes into Taurus in this eclipse season energy, in this area, and starts to show us how this area of change, this area of recent change, is going to create new stability. Our changes are only going to go so far. What you need to know about Pluto is in shadow. Pluto is slowing down. Pluto is going to turn retrograde, literally in the next few weeks, very, very quickly from this point. So this new moon that feeds into the next day, again, it's taking our actions to the next level and understanding where we need to go back over some things. Understanding that we've only can go so far in the transformation. You can have a small inner city yard and build like 5 garden beds, but this is not going to produce enough food like a farm would. So understand that the changes that we've made are beneficial. They're going to help us. They will feed us garden beds, going off that, planting veggies in the garden beds, that kind of thing. But this area of change, as constructive as it is, will only go so far. It can only do so much. And that will kind of feed into where Pluto is at, moving for the rest of the month. We will recognize the changes that have been made, and it's only going to go so far. We will feel the limitations. It will be frustrating for some. Some people will say something about limitations, like, well, you can only do so much. Guess what? I'm aware. Thank you. I was very, very aware of that. But it will make for a lot of that rethinking energy that will start on the 21st. Or the rethinking has been during that timeline of Mercury spinning. And then once Mercury turns around and starts its retrograde, that's what that little RX symbol stands right there, and starts to go back in the other direction, it's understanding that we've already dealt with something and it's going to make us move back over. Now, the other thing about Mercury retrogrades is it starts all of the repurpose, reconnect, reevaluate, redo, rethink, revisit, we got to redo some things. I've already said that a couple of times. The thing about Mercury retrogrades and the rethinking is where we're going to have that rethinking has very tangible properties, because Mercury's retrograde is in an earth sign. It's in this area that's meant to be very, very solid. So we're going to be going over something very tangible. In a lot of ways, very, very tangible, very, very real. Whether it's a real connection, real physical garden bed type of thing, or, reality in a lot of ways. We're rethinking something as we go back over. And part of the rethinking is being fed from other areas of our chart, but not in a negative sense, not in a breaking brick wall sense of, no, you've gone the wrong way. Turn it around, Pac-Man. No, it's more along the lines of, okay, it's not a complete loss. Just make an adjustment and you'll be fine. You'll be right back here in no time. And you will. Okay. I am again going to do additional episodes this month that will go over that Libra full moon, and it will be based off the ascendant, so where it falls off your chart based off your rising sign. I will do an eclipse season video, and then I will also do a Mercury retrograde video. And then all of that again is going to be tied to the ascendant. So if you are not familiar with your ascendant, feel free to message me. We can figure it out. We can talk about it. We can get your chart pulled. We can figure out where that ascendant is. That way you always kind of know that energy. The purpose of the ascendant and the importance of it is it tells us where your chart starts, and it tells us exactly where these transits are going to come through and how they're going to play out in your chart and what they represent more specifically than this generic month ahead forecast. Now, I said at the beginning of the video, I kind of gave you a warning with the month ahead, is that I'm going to stop about 10 days before the end of the month. And that's because this is just about the major transits. This Mercury retrograde, it's going to affect us all the way until May 14th. The eclipse that starts with that new moon eclipse in Aries, that's going to take us forward all the way into the middle of May. So understand that just because this particular video is stopping at April 21st doesn't mean anything. We're still going to have lots of transits, and you'll see that in the week ahead. I wanted to do the major ones so people were aware. And if you are aware that a Mercury retrograde is coming and you start to see those little things that are getting affected by Mercury turning around, so you're seeing the glitches in your technology, you're seeing, the issue, you're hearing that little boop, boop, boop in your car, already that I was like, all right, well, I got to go take care of this. If you know it's coming, you know that If you're getting the inklings ahead of time, take care of it then before it becomes a problem later. You're going to start to see the little do, especially after that Libra full moon. You're going to see that little area of redo this. Hey, it's time for the maintenance check. It's time for the what's it? The updates. The full update that's going to change everything on the phone layout or on your computer layout. It's going to change your app stuff. But we're going to see those things kind of come through. You're going to start to see the glitches in your phone. If it's time for you to get an upgrade, you'll literally see the glitches start to come through. That's going to be super fun, especially whenever we're right around this area where we get this odd little Mercury, Moon, Uranus triple conjunction right here. The other thing that we're going to start to see is people coming back. I didn't say that earlier, and I will kind of go over that a little bit more in the Mercury retrograde video ahead. But you're going to start to see certain people, certain solid, tangible, needed people for the next chapter. They're going to start to come back. Anyways. Oh, hit me up with questions. Hit me up with concerns. I appreciate and love every single one of you. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for the following. I do. I sincerely appreciate everyone. So if you need anything, message me through the Spiritually Bougie page. If you actually know me individually, then of course you know how my DMs work. So I will talk to everybody very, very soon, and subscribe.